Hello,
All
man.
right.
I'm recording. Okay, so how are you doing? I
I'm good. I'm good. What time is it for you?
It's like 3 p.m.
Ah, it's fine. Yeah, it's a
We
good time
should.
for both of us.
Yeah. I was worried that it would be like super late for you since you're literally on
Nah,
the
don't
other
worry.
half. Okay, so
Yes.
obviously I have to start with the most important question. How did you get the idea of the game, and how is it like different compared to the what? Like how different is the game compared to the first idea?
Oh, that was correct of you to ask the second half of that question because it's nowhere near
Really?
the original idea. As much as I'd like to say that this was like a well-planned, well thought out story that was documented and whatever, it really wasn't. Because originally it was just supposed to be another short project. And if you remember in the beginning of the game, where it's just this little 2D platformer, that's all it was supposed to be. And
Really?
basically, as I was making it, I was coming up with these ideas as I was going. So everything, like all the twists and all the turns that happen in the game, is just me while writing it, thinking of those twists on the spot. So a lot of it is improv. There was never an original plan, but I would say about halfway through the game, I was like, all right, I'm just gonna write the ending. I can't just improv the entire thing.
That
So
that's
the whole like turn of darkness really was just an in the moment thing. Wasn't well planned, but it turned out fine.
that's very insane. What
Hmm.
even inspired the change, you know? What made you turn the game from just a little platformer to, this about the themes about development, the burnout, depression and all that stuff,
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
because it's a big theme change. I will say originally I knew I wanted to have it turn. So like when I was making the 2D platformer game, the puzzle one, I knew it was gonna like turn and glitch or whatever. So when it glitches in that part like that, I knew it was gonna do some kind of turn, jump scare, horror, crash out thing. But I hadn't thought of anything mental health wise. And I guess that came to me when I was like making it into more of a horror game. And I think the final product isn't much of a horror game. Like it's not much jump scares. It's not really scary to play. I guess what made me make the whole mental health idea was when I realized that I just couldn't make a scary game. Like, something that while you play you're nervous and there's jump scares and whatever. I realized I wasn't good at that. And so I think I switched it from a horror game to more of a psychological horror game. And that's where all the mental health related things came up.
The whole thing about the game, at the start, I genuinely like the first time I installed the game, I was just scrolling through Steam's free page, and I saw this little platformer and didn't look at the description, so I installed the game, thinking it would be just a little like platformer game. And when everything, started unfolding, that really like made me think about the deeper meaning of the game and the ARG.
Yeah,
So
in a way, I think it's funny. Like when you're playing it, you think you're getting into a platformer, and then the game changes and you change with it. But I think it's funny that like I was doing the same thing while writing it. I was originally thinking it was going to be a platformer, and then it turns and everything. I find that very like funny.
uh from where is the meaning of play? And more I mean I worded it wrong, but what's the meaning of the word play?
Oh, the title, you're
Yeah.
gonna feel it's very, very cliche and stupid. It's very simply the word help spelt backwards.
Oh my
That's all
god,
it
that's
is.
the whole
I know.
theme of the game.
It
Okay.
sounds very like genius, but trust me, in the moment it was very
No,
cringe,
I
and I was like, sure.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
That's
And when
insane.
at the beginning of the game when you press H to begin, there's a sequence after in the
Yeah, where it's
beginning
like
when it says
H
like
E
press
L
H.
P, like you have to click.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. That
That was
was
that
a
was
whole
designed
theme
so that
I realized after like replaying the game because I played it back in 2023 or so, I think, like at the end of
wow.
2023.
That's when it came out.
Yeah, it October, I think. I am not sure, but when I played
Yeah,
it
it
initially,
came.
I did not realize a lot of the themes of the game. I when I'm playing the VAC right now, like the whole theme about this inner thought entity. How did the like okay, 1 second, I need to word this correctly in English. I'm sorry,
That's all right.
it's not really my
The
first language. Uh
I call it the red text. If you're
the
talking
red
about the red text thing,
I
yeah.
call it the entity because well it's that in
Mhm.
the biosensor thing,
Yes, yeah.
the entity. Where
Mhm.
does the entity begin being its own thing other than just the thoughts of the developer? Since at some point it just looks like it's the developer's thoughts about, how bad he is, how he should stop working, how nobody likes his game. And at some point it becomes its own thing where it tries to stop the player from,
Mhm.
continuing the story.
So what I like is that, and I hate to have this answer, but I like it's kind of up to the person's interpretation. Like, while, as in, if we look at the story for how it's actually told, it's very fictional, you know? The red text is just, the entity is just supposed to be like inside the person's head. But then in the game, it's actually doing things in real life. That's very fiction, not realistic. But what I like about it is that it's up to interpretation. Like, you can either think it's a realistic thing, it's a real entity, it has real world control, or you can take the game from the perspective of the developer who's depressed. And if you think of it like that, then the game is just from his perspective. And this thing that's just in his head doesn't have any real world control, is actually very, very real to him in his mental state. And that's not the way it was written. That's not the intended thing. The intended thing is for you to have your own interpretation. Because I feel like a lot of people who play this game have experience with those themes, have experience with depression. And to be honest, there's not one scientific explanation for how everyone deals with it. Everyone deals with it differently. And for some people, they can think of it like a real entity, just like it was portrayed in the game. And for others, it's a lot more subtle. But in this game, the developer, his interpretation of his depression is this real thing that controls him.
A lot about the theme of the game is really about interpretation, but one thing I
Mhm.
wonder, is there a actual ending that you thought about, you know, your own interpretation of the game that you can find? Because if you do the ARG at the end, there is the video confession.mp3, or it was mp4, yeah, mp4, where
Yeah.
the developer talks to you for the last time, and it's kind of unfolded that he did something bad.
Mhm.
Is there actually something you like hinted to it in the game, or is it just left for interpretation? What, like, did he murder somebody? What exactly was the meaning behind that
So
part?
so when I was developing the game, I knew I wanted to have some kind of ARG, some kind of extra super secret hidden content. And to be honest, unfortunately, I underestimated people. And what was supposed to be really, really secretive, cracked in a few months, only like a couple of people see. All of those secret endings and whatever were discovered on like the second day of the game's release. And because of that, they've now become a lot more popular than I would like them to. I really intended for it to be like subtle, only a few people are going to find it. But now there's like a Steam guide, everyone looks at it, everyone finds the
Yeah.
secret endings. So when I was writing those secret endings, to be honest, I really wanted to keep it secretive. There are things, like you said, there are suggestions to what happened, but I didn't really fully think it through writing wise. Obviously, the main game I like thought about in terms of writing, I put a lot of effort into it, fixed up a lot of the writing issues and plot holes or whatever, because that was the product that everyone was going to play. I didn't really think that many people were going to go through, like, I call it the murder, that whole ARG thing, right? And it does hint towards a murder. So unfortunately, there isn't much thought behind the writing of that, and that sucks. And I don't really like that. But it's one of the things that I'm trying to improve in terms of my writing. Actually, consider everything as part of the story. And so, unfortunately, um, I don't have a very good answer or in-depth knowledge of that whole side of the story. But it's just, it's just unfortunate
It's
that
really
it's
understandable.
more popular.
Yeah, it's understandable. The whole
Hmm.
thing is that this game has a very deep story. Like, to think of everything and to make everything, at the same time be metaphorical and
Hmm.
be, to connect with each other must have been really
Yeah.
hard. So I don't really, I mean, especially since the game is supposed to be interpreted, there isn't really the need of a concrete answer. I was just wondering if there is, that theme of murder was actually intended, or did it mean something else?
Yeah, I agree with that in that not everything has to be concrete and it can be up to
At
interpretation
some point, it
and
actually makes it better since, you're left with a feeling of, like, you know, mystery and questioning,
satisfaction.
other
Yeah.
than being
Hmm.
handed everything at the same time.
Yes. And well, yeah, and one of my regrets of the game from a writing perspective is with that whole ARG thing. I either should have made it more secretive, like so not every single player is goes through it and it's easy, or just like fleshed it more out story-wise. But unfortunately, there's not much I can say that's concrete about it.
Another question about the mechanics and the whole ARG. Is there something that still hasn't been discovered about the ARG? Or is it like fully throughout found out already everything that secretives has been, found? Or is there something that's very hard to find that's, still missing?
Good question. Um, in terms of things to find, like passwords and, secrets that are hidden behind codes and puzzles and whatever, that has all been worked out. There was for a while, I think it was probably a year after development, where a year after release, not everything had been found. But to this date, everything has been found, and I'm happy to say that, in terms of secrets and stuff. What hasn't, well, what the lack of completion is what we were just talking about before, the interpretation of that ARG story, in which, like you said, there's nothing concrete. There's just mentions of what happens and nothing's actually said. And so I think what hasn't been worked out is just a coherent theory. There is, when I was writing that ARG story, there is something coherent there and there's clues left. But I haven't heard many people theorize or actually say what I believe was the intended scenario that happened in real life with the developer and his therapist.
Now, I mean, there are many theories. I do have my own theory, but I'll leave that for the video since it's gonna take a while to just explain it here.
Looking forward to it. I'll be watching it.
I think, was there any cut content or something you couldn't fit into the game or like scrapped midway just because it doesn't fit the theme?
A lot, a lot. And as well, unfortunately, there's also a lot that did make it into the game that I look back on and I realize this should have been cut content. But yeah, I was just too far in and I, wanted to get the game done with. But there is a lot that was cut. One of the things that I can think of from the beginning was there was supposed to be a section where the developer actually takes you through other games that he's made because the 2D platformer where there's puzzles and there's cubes and you play as the astronaut, that is one of his games. There was originally a part of the game in the very beginning where you also go through some of his other games, and then the entity takes over those games and makes them different. And there's a whole section where the developer's like, "Whoa, I didn't make this," and I'm not sure why it got cut. I think that idea is really, really good and fully complete, by the way. The section was fully complete and voice
Ooh.
lines and everything. I think I ended up taking it away because the specific game that I wrote that he made, I think was just a bit cringe. That also had a bit to do with mental health, and I thought it was a bit too on the nose. Like it really, really hammered home this guy is depressed. And I like, I prefer to do show not tell. And with this in the game, it was literally telling you that the developer has made other games involving depression and whatever. And so that didn't make the cut. But I still like that idea of, playing the other developers' games and the
I
entity
mean,
taking over it and altering what the developer's intended meaning was. But that didn't make it in.
in some form, in my opinion, it did kind of make it in the way you need to
Hmm.
go. Barchi was it? You have to for you to fight the Biosenar, or I don't really know the concrete name of the thing. When you get transcript 10,
Hmm.
you get the hint that you need to go find the other game. Which the
Yeah.
first time I
So
was playing around, I did get the hint that it was, and I started searching through the clicker game, but I never actually thought it would be, its own separate thing compared to the game. I thought you would find it inside the game.
yeah, I considered doing that for a while, and that would have been one of the steps that I would have taken if I wanted to make it harder. But I do know, and so yes, like the game Click is an example of like a game that the developer would have made. In real life, I made that game. That was just one of my order games for a game jam. But I guess in the story, yes, that is one of the games that he made. But the main idea that got cut was the idea that the entity starts altering his games. And you can argue that makes it in as the entity
That is
modifies the
really,
original
it
game.
tries to stop you from playing the game by crashing it and
Yeah,
modifying it all the time. So,
exactly. I guess the more I talk about this, the more I realize that this idea ended up actually making the cut. It just wasn't in the way I originally intended.
technically, the
But
Pink
I
Room you
think,
can say is one of the developer's games that he
yeah,
made for, I think
it
he made it
is.
for Amelia. That
Yeah, that's right. Oh, that's a
the
theory,
entity
but
starts
yes.
altering it even in the secret ARG part, wherever it starts speaking back to you and gives you one of the codes. I think it was a
Yeah.
code. Not like for the longest time could not understand where to put the code, but um
Mhm.
and at some
And
point the room gets ruined, the whole game in a way gets deleted because the developer or the entity doesn't want it to exist in a way.
yeah, the more I think about it, I realize I probably really like this idea, like subconsciously, because this idea came before the Pink Room. This is, I don't know if you remember the whole sequence of the game, but this idea where you play the other developer's game literally happens after the first crash. You relaunch the game, the developer apologizes the first time he's talking to you, and he wants to keep you entertained, so he brings in his other games.
Instead, he brings you to the
So,
empty room with the chair that you have to hit 1,000 times.
exactly. Yes. Oh, the chair.
The chair, that got me so pissed. I was probably just
Mhm.
sitting there for an hour hitting that chair. Holy shit.
Do you have
I
there's
have
an
every
achievement
achievement. I have every achievement.
yeah, because originally, if a bit of spoilers, when you hit the chair 1,500 times, there is a sequence that plays, and that was originally supposed to be cut as well. And then
I don't
I was
really
like,
remember the
that's
sequence that
ah,
exactly happened,
there
since I did it way
there
back when I played it for the first time, not like last week, when I was like preparing to make the script for the video.
well, you know what that means. You have to go do it
I
again.
have to do it again, yeah.
God, please don't.
Didn't you
That's
at some
another one
point
of my
joke that
regrets.
you'd make a new achievement for hitting the chair 10,000 times as well at some point on the forums?
That sounds like me. I remember there were actual like complaints, negative reviews regarding the chair. And
Oh
in
my god.
hindsight, that makes sense because it's not like anything else in the game. I really underestimated people wanting to 100% the game. I really, really underestimated that. At one point, there was even a negative review that actually very very philosophical. They said that they really didn't like the whole 1,500 share hits because it kind of goes against what the game's trying to say. Because the idea of hitting a chair, like bumping into this chair, doing it over and over again, repetitive, like 1,000 times, very repetitive. And they made a whole comment about like depression, and it was like, look, that's an interesting point, but like it's just a chair. It's not that deep.
That
It
is true,
really
but if
goes.
even that way you can look it in a deep way, since everything is
I
about the
know.
meaning. Hitting the chair repeatedly is kind of the same way the developers like how
Yeah,
they cycle.
and now let
It's
me tell
like
you this.
it's like oh my god, is this a game theory? It's literally just a chair, but you can put it in so many ways to go against each
Yep.
other, just because of how open the game is. So I really, other than the fact that it was, I had to hit a chair for an hour, I didn't find it, breaking the whole game and like going against the game's theories and all that. I
Yeah,
just thought
and
it
like,
was
look,
a funny thing put in there, as an inside the
Mhm.
joke or something like that.
Yeah, well, it is. I can tell you from my perspective, there's no deeper meaning. It is, I intended for it to be just a chair. It was there because there was nothing to do in that room as the developer yaps for like a minute. And so I put this chair in just so there's at least something to do. There's a lot of talking in the game, but at least
There is.
there's something to do idly. But yeah, people overanalyze, and that's good. Overanalyze is the wrong word. Like people analyze where I didn't intend, and
But
it really
more like
makes me think like,
overthink, I would say.
yeah, but not in a bad way at all. It's an interpretation. It's something I didn't think of. To be honest, it is a coincidence. But it's just fascinating to me. So many people come up with these ideas that I never even thought about. But yeah, very interesting.
Let me see. What was the most challenging part of the game? Like to make in a way.
hmm Um, I don't think there was a specific section in the game that was hard to make, but in terms of my lifestyle while working on the game, because I worked on it during school in one of my final years, and I really the reason I made the video game in the first place wasn't because I was like very interested in specifically Pleh. That came like towards the end. Originally, I just wanted to release a big game on Steam so I can get it on my portfolio and I can, have some experience in getting a job or something. So I really wanted to focus on that over school, and that was a dumb idea. But the biggest challenge was probably juggling everything in my life. I had school, I had this game, and at the beginning half of working on the game, I wasn't working on it full time, and I really didn't like that. I wanted like every single day to be working on it, but I just didn't have the time. And I think one of the biggest challenges was finding the time and finding that right mix. Because in a way, ironically, there was a part of development where I was working too hard on the game, and I did start to feel a little bit like a certain developer working on a game. While working on Player too much, I did start to get a bit burnt out, and that's very ironic. But I think the hardest part was finding the right balance between working on the game enough that I feel satisfied, but not overworking, and also focusing on the other arguably important things in my life.
I mean, that is very hard to deal with. At some point, I did do game development.
hmm
I still kinda do, but I understand now, feeling bad because you didn't do enough, but at the same time, you don't have the time to do enough, for yourself.
Exactly.
Which is,
Yeah.
the
It's
theme of the game in a way. It comes naturally that the game
Mhm.
about the game development will have that theme.
Yeah. While I'm not, in a very bad place as like the characters portrayed in the game were, there was definitely some inspiration of myself put in there, what I was feeling, not just with Player, but with other games. I've never worked on a game as big as Player, but I'm also just a creative person, and it's not just game development, it's in other creative fields as well, where like, you work on a project and burnout is what it is. And I put a lot of that, a personal experience, into the whole mental health burnout aspect of the game.
I mean, that is one thing anybody can relate with these types of games is everybody feels depression, burnout, loneliness at some point, isolation.
hmm
So
And
it is
it
easy
doesn't
to
have to
connect
be
yourself
about,
with the game.
yeah,
Even if it's not the
yeah,
same way, it's still easy to connect yourself to the game, even if you're not a game
ex-
developer.
exactly, yeah. While the game itself, or the character itself, is a game developer, and his burnout is in his field of game development. It's not even just creativity. It's just like any form of a project, anything you can work on for yourself, there is too much and it can cause, depression. And that's why the game is so relatable, even for people who are not game developers, because that's such a specific type of people.
I mean, that is very important since, if it goes way too specific into one way, it does over the audience.
Hmm.
One thing about the game, the only part of the game really I didn't exactly understand, I guess it's the interpreting way. It's again an interpretation. Is the whole part with Amelia where you text her all those bad words, I guess in a way to push her away from you,
Yep.
but it is interpreted through the red text. Why exactly? Like, what parts? Why would the developer say those words to her? Is the real
Hmm.
question.
So I mentioned way before about how everyone deals with depression differently. And from this developer's perspective, because that's what the game is from, it's from his perspective, he sees his depression as an entity, as a thing that has control over him. Now that's subjective. Whether, if you have depression, you might not feel the same way. You might not feel
Obviously, there is
that
way too many
something is,
different depression like types, and
yeah. But to this developer, he felt like this depression was an entity and that it actually had control over his actions. So in real life, when he's texting Amelia, he's not actually, trying to write something nice and then this thing is physically stopping him. This game is just from his perspective, how he's interpreting it. And he's interpreting it as he doesn't want to hurt her, but this thing is making him hurt her. When in reality, it's just his mental state. Nothing's stopping him from, oh, that's arguable, but nothing is physically stopping him from writing these things that he doesn't mean. But he sees it as this entity is forcing him to do it. When in actuality, he's just writing these harmful messages and he's pushing away someone that he loves, even if he doesn't mean to. And it's just his interpretation of the actual representation of depression in his head. In his head, it's a physical thing that controls him.
I mean, in a way, I see it. It is like that, but it's also like how I mean, I'm sorry, how he sees what he writes and not what actually it is. You know,
Hmm.
the fact that he sees them as that harmful messages when in reality it could be way different. He's still driving her away. But I just thought that those messages were like out of nowhere and way too harsh, not something you would
Hmm.
randomly say. So I thought if it was like you know a metaphor for driving away people and not actual text he sent.
Well, yeah, we're not watching what actually happened. We're just watching like how it felt from the developer. Because in terms of where we are in the story when this is happening, the scene after this is the scene where he talks to the player and he feels very guilty and he's about to commit suicide. So I believe, personally, when I was writing it, I was thinking that before he's about to end his own life, he's actually reflecting on what he's done. And when we're watching him text, this isn't what just happened. This is him reflecting on that. And therefore, this is an unreliable narrator. You're right that this is kind of out of nowhere and like it's very random considering the context of the previous conversation. And we don't know what actually happened. I think it's obvious that he texted something mean and something that really made her push him away. But um it might not have been those exact messages. It might have not been out of nowhere. There's some context that we're missing, and I think that scene is an example of an unreliable narrator.
That can be interpreted in so many ways.
Yeah, it's an
It's actually
interpretation. That's my
insane.
interpret. Someone can think that that's what happened and it's weird, but it's just an interpretation.
I mean, as long as it makes sense in your head, it works in a way.
Exactly.
One
Hmm.
thing as well that I wonder, what is your I mean the developers' perspective about the theme about the door. Oh my god, that's a lot
The
about.
door. Yeah.
Yeah, the door. The theme about the door and its connection to Amelia and her own depression. What
Mhm.
exactly did you mean to say with the theme about the door?
This takes me back because the door is never like mentioned in the
It's
story. It's
always
never
exactly
referenced.
after you talk to Emilia. It's always
Yeah.
exactly after doing something connected to her.
Mhm. It just appears visually multiple times and it's never referenced in the story. And to be honest, I can't remember exactly when I was writing what I meant the door to be. I think if when I'm looking back on the game now, I'm just reanalyzing it. I'm not like saying what I intended. I'm just thinking like, what do I think now that it means? And with the door, well, objectively, here's what it is objectively, right? The door is the therapist's room, right? That's the objective thing. In the blue room with the chair, which is the therapist's room, that door is there. And like example, in the the house chores section, when you walk down that long corridor at the very end, there's doors all the way down there. When you step through the door, you're in the therapist's room. So objectively, the door is just the room to the therapist. When it's shown in the game, because it's not just shown in the game in that room, it's shown in the game many times in the ocean section.
Which, by the way,
There's
to
a bunch of
mention,
doors.
the ocean section
Mhm.
is my favorite part of the game. It just
It's
looks
one of my
so
favorites. Yeah, it's one of my
stunning
heroes as
and
well.
beautiful at the same time. It also gives that
Mhm.
feeling of, depression as well.
Yeah, I think the ocean scene is like this, like that's like that's the biggest like depression vibe scene. But anyway, with the door, I believe that the door is like whenever the door appears, it's the part of him that he's tucked away that wants to go and get help. Because ultimately, at the very end of the game, he he feels like he hasn't done enough. He feels like he hasn't got that help. And so he comes to the conclusion that he does, and the game ends the way that it does. The door is there when the door is his hope, and it's the little bit of him wanting to reach out. His therapist maybe is doing something for him. It might not be enough, but he at least recognizes that with the therapist, it's at least a good first step to try to go and get help and try to become happier in life. And so when that door appears, um, it's the little part of him that wants to go and get help. And Amelia contributes to that. And that's why it's part of the reason why the door appears when Amelia's there. It's a part of the reason why um in the 2D game, in the glitch 2D game, at the end of that whole glitch section, there's a door that the astronaut goes and walks into at the end because game development is something that he enjoys. There can be a door of hope in that, but sometimes there is burnout, and sometimes that door might be hard to find. And then at the very end of the game, there's an achievement relating to this, where after the whole pink section, and you're back in the original place where you walk and you go see the menu again, you can turn around and the door is there. But when you walk towards it, the door closes on you. And that I thought was a very final thing, a very depressing thing, saying like, well, that's it. He's gone. He couldn't find the door and he couldn't he all he had was hope and he wasn't able to I don't know how to word this correctly, but basically without beating around the bush, he wasn't able to become happy with his life.
We,
So that's my opinion on the door,
that's
but up to
the
interpretation, of course.
obviously. One thing here about him not being able to beat the thing, the feeling, the entity.
Hmm.
How, like, from what I've heard from you, the ending where that's like I have to mention that is spoilers for the ARG, where there is an option after doing a few things, you can delete the entity, and
Hmm.
you transform into this 3D section where the entity gets destroyed. How canonical
Yeah.
is that? Or is that just its own different thing, like an alternate universe? Or is it like canonical in some way?
No, it's a very, very valid question. And it's something that I didn't fully think through. As I said before with the ARG, the writing, in my opinion, is not as tight as the game. I didn't intend for everyone to see it. And when I look back on that, I do think like, was that canon? If it is, does it take place after? And like objectively speaking, it's not. It can't be canon. I think because like, well, developers not really there at the end of the game, and this is likely taking place after the events of the game. So it doesn't make sense in my head. I think the reason that it's in the game is just because I wanted. I don't really have a good a good answer for that. But in my opinion, I think when I wrote that, I was like, I just wanted to have more content in there. I wanted to
A
show
happy
like,
ending in a way,
and
you can say.
it's it's not like objectively, I guess it's happy because the bad thing dies. It doesn't feel happy. It doesn't feel very
It does feel
satisfying
kind
to
of
finish.
lonely afterwards, not gonna lie, but
It does, yeah, with the whole game corrupting or whatever. I think I wrote it just to show, just to really enforce the point about the depression thing. The depression thing, the red text and the game. I wanted to show that there was a link between the two. Because something that the game doesn't get really in depth into is that sometimes having that depression and having that burnout, and this is really sad, but I think it's true, it can actually help with the game. Maybe not in a good way, but I think having that burnout actually forces you to work on the game more in an unhealthy way, of course, but in a way, if you have that burnout, it's going to force you to work on the game more and it's going to produce a game at the very least. Whereas if the developer realized that his depression was harming him and he wanted to go get help and he wanted to stop being as depressed as he is, he might not have worked on the game. He might have realized that this game, working on it so hard, is the cause of his depression, and that's not something that the game gets into much, but that ending kind of does hint that without this red text there might just be no game, and that's sad, but I believe that to be true to an extent.
that is very. I never thought of it this way. I just thought of
Hmm.
it as, like an alternate ending where if the developer overcame his issues through your help in a way, the player. I don't know how much of the player, because sometimes the player is, well, the developer himself, since you do
Yeah,
command what he says and what he does sometimes. So I don't know
yeah,
like
that's also.
if you can,
Mhm.
you can't really say the player helps him overcome depression. It's more like a version of him overcoming the depression through, the player's control.
Yeah, and that's also another whole thing, by the way. What actually is the player? Like, are you playing as a player of the game? Are you with the developer? It's huge interpretation, and that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah, that I feel like that's more of how in literature. I don't know how exactly it's called in literature in English. It's like the
An observer.
the observer. Yeah, you're more of an observer. You are
Mhm.
the version of the developer that's just observing and showing what us what's happening. Sometimes the writer is the observer and the person that the story is about, but they're still a different person. They don't share the same
Yeah,
experience, but it's the same person. And I and
an
I
interpretation. Mhm. An
and I did do
interpretation that
good
I
in
had
that
at
way.
one point. Oh, sorry. Um, an interpretation that I had at one point was, I said before how like when the developer's in his final moments and he's reflecting on what he said to Amelia. And my perspective was that when you're texting Amelia, that wasn't actually happening. That was just him reflecting and remembering. An interpretation is that everything in the game is just him remembering. Like he's in his final moments, and this is just him reflecting. And then at the end of his reflection, after he's recounted everything, the main things that's happened in his life, with Pleh, with Amelia, with everything else that you play through, it's only then that he comes to the conclusion that he comes to. That's an interpretation of who the player is. It's just him reflecting of himself.
That's I don't know how to explain this in English, but that is extremely interesting way to see it. In one way, you can see it in a way that the whole story of the game is just him looking back at his life and what you can
Mhm.
say the game and what you experience is what he thinks before ending it.
Or it's just someone playing the game player and then all this depression stuff happens. It's totally up to whatever interpretation. I
That
didn't,
is true.
I, what I just said before, I totally didn't think of that up until very, very late into development. So, when I was writing the whole you're playing as someone, like, I wasn't thinking about you're the developer, but it totally works if that's what you want to think, if that's your takeaway. Totally works.
That is very interesting. One thing as well that I just realized the whole thing with when you text her out those things, Amelia. Um, at the
Mhm.
end of the game, you also get texts from her where she's sorry, and I mean
Yeah.
she's obviously not mad at you. So that does really show that she was never mad at you to begin with. It was more of the developer slash you version of Amelia, that how he sees her
Yeah, that is a big hint that the unreliable narrator, maybe things wasn't as bad as
as
the
it
developer
seemed.
portrayed them. Maybe those messages weren't as hateful. Maybe something like that never happened. Don't know.
How left up
Never
to
know.
the player, obviously.
Yes, yes.
Uh, that I mean, that's obviously a joke that I'm gonna talk about now. But
hmm
what about Pleh 3?
So, wait, are you aware of the Play cinematic universe
I
and
am
the
not
plays
really,
that have
that's
been
why I'm
made?
wondering. I was researching for this video literally like at 3 a.m. last night, and I came
hmm
by Pleh 3, I open it, and my headphones start blasting
Oh,
music, and my game starts running at 3 frames per second.
I apologize. Not really. So I will now, this is my official, because there's no coherent list anywhere. This is my official list of the Pless cinematic universe. First, we have Pleh. That's the game on Steam. Great, done. Um, in Pleh, you can press 10.17. That's like a cheat code. 10.17, and that opens this developer
The
room.
developer
That's a
room,
whole
yeah, I
inside joke.
remember the developer room.
Yeah, that's a whole inside joke, right? Inside that developer room, you can access Pleh 2 officially.
That's insane. I
Ple-
didn't know about. I did get into the room, but I did not know there
okay,
was a
this
play to
this isn't
inside.
this isn't as deep as you're thinking. Pleh 2 is literally just like there's a corridor that says Pleh 2 down here. You go down there, it loads with the Jester Games intro, and then it's just a room with a chair, and then there's just the text like this is Pleh 2, that this is it. And then when you hit the chair, the game crashes.
Oh my
That's all.
god.
That is Pleh 2.
Oh my god.
Right. Then there's Pleh 3. Pleh 3 was just, I was streaming one time. I don't stream that often, but
I didn't
every now
know.
and then I get the vibe to stream. And so this is a stream, didn't have anything to do. We had a lot of Pleh fans in the chat. And so I said, I'll make a game just for fun on the stream, but I'll have to use like chat recommendations and you have to recommend features. And right off the bat, one of the features was Pleh 3. So suddenly the game was Pleh 3. All the other things part of the game, like you mentioned, there's a frame drop, there's loud music. Those were just chat saying it has to have loud music. It has to run at a random
What
frame rate
about
between
the
5
long
and 10.
text? What about the long text that if when you drop down
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and there
That's
is
just some
like a
random
mile
copy
long
pasta.
text? What is that about?
The long te- I remember that's the B movie script. I remember that.
Oh my
And
god,
then
that's thanks God I didn't get into actually not stopping frame by frame to read it. I did like record it so I can do that, but I
oh,
decided
there
to
is
wait.
Yeah, there is. Sorry, when the game crashes, it does show different. It shows like some kind of copy pasta. But
It's
in the
like
game, you walk
the
towards this.
it's like a Wattpad love story about the red
Yeah,
text entity.
And a guy named Julian. I remember it
Julia.
surprisingly well for some reason. So yeah, that game is just a mess of random meme chat
So
recommendations. And my
it's not
favorite
actually
one
part of the
is
war itself, it's just, inside
no, not
jokes and
nor is Pleh 2,
yeah, yeah.
believe me. My favorite feature, by the way, of Play 3 that isn't obvious is that every time you relaunch the game, it takes an extra 3 seconds to load initially. Just one of the great features of Play 3 that chat recommended.
I
So,
did not
yeah.
notice that, maybe because the game crashed on me twice and I just decided there is no point to trying to get in again.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to play Play 3 more than once either. But, so that is Play 3. Then I guess there's the sex update. Have
The
you played
sex
the
update.
have you played the
No,
content or you
no.
have all the achievements?
I don't know. I don't let me look. I don't.
This is okay. Wait, no. This is the content update, which is the
Oh,
chair marrying the chair and everything.
Oh, I see, I see. I didn't know it was named the sex update.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't want to risk having the sex update written on Steam or in the game because, like, it's just another. The
Yeah,
game
Pleh
doesn't have any
content
mention of
update
sex
version
originally.
1.6.9. Yeah,
But in Discord, it was referred to as the sex update.
that's insane.
But yeah, I didn't want to have to tick another box like this game contains sexual themes. It already was restrictive enough in terms of
Yeah,
depression and
about who can
mental
play it,
health.
and now that.
Exactly. So it canonically it is the sex update, but unfortunately it is labeled as the content update.
I see, I see.
And that is the extent of the Plus cinematic universe currently.
Currently, is there any plans to expand the Pleh cinematic universe in the future?
Definitely not.
You're
Um
that's a closed door. Moving on, you're working on your new game.
yeah, so the new game is nothing to do with Play, and I'll
Yeah.
talk about that in a second. But no, there will definitely not be any Player 2, any like actual, not funny, not memes, actual serious
Yeah.
Player sequel or relating to
I mean,
Player's
the
done.
story is pretty much wrapped up. There isn't anything to talk about other than, actually switching to Amelia's point of view. But
Yeah. No, no. I don't think that Player, this is my opinion. I don't think it's the kind of game that
that,
needs anything
you know,
more. So there, if I do another shit, because that's what those things are, they're shit posts, the sequels and whatever. I don't know, maybe won't be a big deal. Uh but no, there's definitely no like official more player content.
Okay, okay, I see, I see. So, what about your currently developed game? That I even,
Hmm.
like, at some point I remember back, since I joined recently through my, let's say, my account, this account. That's yeah, in the server. I remember even when I joined, you still just were starting development on night in time. How's the
Yep.
game going? Is there any sneaks, developer insight you can show us here, or do you wanna
Okay,
keep it
so
secretive?
so about Night and Time, I started working on Night and Time, and not much has already been said, but I started working on it, I reckon, a few months, probably 6 months after Play released. And unfortunately, I got 6 months into development, and this I've publicly announced this already that this happened. I was 6 months into development, and then I was in my final year of school. And I made the decision to put a hold on Night and Time just to finish school, focus on school for the year, and then work on it afterwards. And that finished up. So for the entirety of 2024, which was my final year of school, I didn't work on Night and Time. So even though the game's been announced for like a year and a half, it sucks because it's only been in development for half a year, which is so little time.
It is a
So
very little,
mhm,
in the
the game is
development.
currently being like fully worked on full
You're
time. I
you're
sorry,
fully
before I was on this,
how is it? You stop the hiatus, so you're completely working on it now, right?
Yeah, completely. Yeah. Before I was on this call, I was working on it.
Oh
So
wow.
the game is like, yeah, the game is currently being worked on as my main project, like biggest project. The last trailer was a year ago, and I think it's sad that like even though the game like it's justifiable, the game has
Obviously,
only been being worked on
everything
for
but
half a
the
year.
obviously your life and everything has to come before the game. You can't really throw everything for the game. It's understandable.
Yeah. So even though like the game has been announced for a year and a half, it makes sense that there's not much progress. But ever since coming back to the game, because now we've been back on the game for a couple of months, and I say we by the way because it's the original musician from Pleh, it's the original artist from Pleh, but there's a whole lot more art now. It's a primarily 2D game. So it's actually, more 2D art. And also another programmer that wasn't involved in Pleh.
I see, I
But
see. You can,
mhm,
I guess you can drop the names down below and I will have them named.
yes, for sure. Well, all I'll say is that since we've began working on the game again, it's been our number one priority to just get some kind of information out there. Because
Do you
like
have
it's been
any
a whole
sneaks you
year.
can show us right now, or would you keep that?
Right now, right now, unfortunately, I can't. But what I can say, and I'm very happy to say this, is depending on when you release this video, that might change. And that's
Oh,
all I'm gonna say.
that's ooh. Well, I'll see. Maybe depending on my uh unexistent upload schedule, I might.
If you happen to be a little slow or are not releasing the video in the next week, I'll say there might be some information.
Oh, that's okay. Okay.
But that's all I'll say.
Okay. 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 Well, good luck with your game. I would love to play it at some point as fast as is possible. I would love to buy it and play it. And
Thank you.
thank you for
Unfortunately,
taking your
like,
time.
oh yes, thank you. There's news coming soon, but there's definitely no game coming soon. It's nowhere
Yeah,
near done.
obviously, it's
But there is
gonna take
there's
time.
news. Yes. But thank you.
Thanks, man, for taking your time to for this very very insane interview. There isn't any other words to literally say it. But
Yeah,
yeah, thank you for
thank you
taking
so
your time.
much. Mhm.
Hope you enjoy the video whenever it releases. And good luck with Night in Time. Can't
Yeah.
wait to see
Thank
the
you.
news. I'll have a link to the Discord server in the description, probably.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Thank you so much for having me. I haven't talked about Play in a while, and talking about this like made me come up with my interpretations again, and it made me think for the first time in a while about the deeper aspects of Play. So thanks for having me, and thanks for making me think about that again. I really appreciate it. It was a blast.
no worries, man. Well, have a nice day. Hope to hear from the new for the hope to hear about Night in Time soon and have a nice day again. Hopes.
Yes, you too. Have a lovely day. I will be watching the video when it comes out. I'm very excited. Thank you. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Bye.